Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a psychotherapist. I'm Brooke Brigham, I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham, I'm the therapist. You can just say therapist from now on. Psychotherapist, psych, legal, it's a lot of...
Okay, well, I want to use the proper terminology.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll use therapist for shorthand.
That would be good.
Okay. Perfect.
So we've solved that. Then the next thing we need to do is get a theme song where we have that, built in.
Yeah.
So we have to say it over.
We'll have to start working on that.
Yes. Well, we'll get Steve on that.
Producer Steve, if you're listening, we need a
theme song.
We need a theme song intro. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the documentary that's currently on Peacock, Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies.
Ooh.
And wow.
This was a lot, this 3-part. And you know who directed this? She also directed that Secrets of Playboy.
Oh.
This woman has seen some.
Well, I'm glad that she only made this one 3 episodes, because I could not have handled 10 episodes. It was a lot. So anyone who's been living under a rock for the last, 10, 15 years, Casey Anthony in 2011 was charged with first-degree murder, accused of killing her 3-year-old daughter.
I think she was almost 3.
3-year-old daughter, Caylee. And, we were just talking about when this was all happening. I think the trial was in 2011, right?
Yeah, but the death was in 2008.
No.
2008. That's when she was born in 2005.
Okay.
And she went missing in June of 2008.
Okay, and the trial was in...
2011.
Oh, that took a long time.
Yeah, she was in jail for 3 years, Casey Anthony.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, neither one of us at the time paid attention because you had a baby and I had a toddler, and I was, I had a little girl. I really didn't want to watch something about a murder of a little girl. And also, I was so turned off by the media coverage because back then we had on television every day people like Nancy Grace, the worst.
She is the worst. She's ruined people.
She's so mean. She's just...
For no reason. I mean...
She's so angry. I mean, she literally yells. She doesn't talk. She yells. And then we had Geraldo, there's Dr. Drew, Dr. Oz.
Yes.
All of them. And then they'd have these guests on that they all every night just would rake this woman over the coals. And they don't know anything.
Yeah.
They don't have any special knowledge or expertise. They're not privy to what the defense is doing or what the defense knows.
Well, we have a real problem in our country. Our legal system, we cannot people do not seem to understand guilty until proven, not
Innocent. Yeah.
Innocent until proven guilty. Like, someone gets charged with something, they take all of the facts exactly how they want to see it. And this is what this whole entire case was about biases and how you see things and how you think people should or should not act. And then taking that through your own lens of your own life and your own experiences, and then making a conclusion from there.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this entire case was.
Yeah. And, despite our past misgivings about juries, the jury in this case, they got it right. They acquitted her. And we'll talk about why. But anyway, she was also very lucky to have a really, really good defense team.
She did. And so I wanted to ask you about this. I had a few legal questions. But what the first one was, because this guy, Jose Baez, he also represented Aaron Hernandez, and he got acquitted too. This guy's good. If you're in Florida,
right,
you got something, go find this guy. So what I understand was, I think in the back of my mind assumed that her family was paying for this legal defense. So how in God's name did she pay for these there was a team of 8 people.
I'm assuming they were court appointed.
Oh, but how, this Jose Baez guy, how did he get there?
Well, so this is a death penalty case.
Okay. They had a death penalty attorney.
Yeah. So I don't know what the law is in Florida, but the law in California is if you're on trial and the death penalty is on the table, then you are entitled to 2 lawyers, and at least one of the lawyers has to be what they call death qualified, which means that you've had a certain amount of experience trying death penalty cases.
Whoops, sorry. I just tried to do something. Things are knocking over.
So they said in the documentary that Jose was not death qualified. So he hadn't been like second chair. That's what so you have a first chair and a second chair. And once you've been the second chair for a certain number of trials, you can move up to first chair.
Okay.
So I don't know how it works out in Florida, but anyway, they needed a death qualified attorney. So then this guy, Caylee Mason, came on, and I am assuming that they were court appointed. And if you're, it's very hard to get that level of experience to be death qualified. So these are good lawyers.
Yeah, these were all really
the
whole team.
And they have a budget of, they have a budget where they can hire experts and consultants and whatnot. But this guy, Caylee Mason, he said in the documentary that he said that he spent $1 million on this trial.
And that's why I'm confused.
Well, because I think what happened was, obviously court appointed only gets paid, whatever the mandated rate is. And they have a budget. I think that he came out of pocket for more money to hire better experts or, you know what I mean? I can't think of any other way to interpret that. I'm not really sure.
So, and that was why I was wondering if Jose was this hotshot legal defense attorney and that he had the money and the backing, that maybe he came in with this idea of this is a huge case.
Right.
These are huge
he wanted the notoriety. Yeah.
I mean, it made him famous. So I was wondering if maybe he wasn't court appointed, but that he swooped in and kind of said, hey, well, I want to represent you. This is my team. We'll pay for things and we'll,
it could
work.
That could have been true. They didn't address it in the documentary, but I'll tell you, there's no way her family was paying for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was like, oh, okay, the family's not paying. Like, I figured that out. I think because I didn't know enough about the case and I knew she had him as her attorney, I think in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, this family must have a little bit of money and they've, I had no idea that the family was what the family is.
Right.
None of that was, I didn't pay attention to that part because you just see the headlines. So should we start from the beginning? From the beginning of the documentary. Because we start by, seeing Casey Anthony today, and they rent her a home to do all of these interviews and to live in, I guess, while she's doing all this, because she feels very, she wants her privacy. She doesn't want people to know where she lives. You immediately, when you first meet her and she's putting up pictures of Caylee, and you really get the sense of she is so guarded. She is so guarded. Like, there's this wall, you can feel it immediately around, like, what are you going to think of me?
Yeah. And maybe we should also just say right out the gate, just briefly, that she was charged with murder after her daughter's body was found. Basically the remains, just skeletal remains of her daughter, was found wrapped up in a bag with duct tape around the bag, something like 15 houses away from her house where she lived in Florida with her parents. So she was 19 when she became pregnant. She was raped, and so there was no father in the picture. I think she named some guy as the father.
Well, I think she said, I was raped at 18. I told no one. I didn't do anything about it. I didn't think anyone would believe me because I was at a party, and she then started dating someone, I think, after the rape, but before she knew she was pregnant. And I think she named him as the father.
Right,
so I think he believed he was the father for the first couple years or first.
Well, I thought that after a few months he had some suspicions, and then they had a DNA test.
Yeah, I remember them talking about that, but I can't remember what the outcome was.
Yeah, well,
they figured out he wasn't the father.
Yeah, he was out of the picture. So she was living with her parents in their home in Florida. I can't remember the city.
Well, they're right outside of Orlando.
They're by Universal. Yeah. Okay. So, and so it comes to the attention of the police through a phone call from Casey's mother. She calls 911 and she says, my granddaughter has been missing for 31 days. And then she puts Casey on the phone, and the 911 operator starts asking her questions. Well, where is your child? Who is she with? And she initially says that she's with she names this woman who's not a real person.
Zanny the nanny.
And says that that's her nanny, and she left her with her. And basically, the police get involved. She tells a series of lies. This will come it'll become more clear later why. But she tells the police a lot of lies and kind of leads them down a rabbit hole. And then they end up finding the remains. Eventually, they identify the body. And
so she's already in jail for this because she gets arrested. She's lying to the police about everything. And then she gets arrested for lying for obstruction of justice and lying to the police. So she's in jail and until they find, and then they find the body, and then they
charge her.
And they charge her for the arrest for the arrest, and then also child neglect. That was the other.
But the police, the investigators, detectives who were involved in the case, they really did not pursue any other suspects.
They honed in on her.
They just honed in on her, even though technically you're supposed to also look at other family members, and you're supposed to look at everybody as a suspect until you eliminate them. And they never seriously considered anybody other than her. And they were particularly drawn in by her father, George, because he was an ex-police officer, very smooth talker, and he acted overly cooperative with them and offered them all kinds of information, basically told them that his daughter was just a total liar. You can't believe what she says, kind of trying to deflect any attention away from himself or anybody else and put it all on Casey. And they did not. They just did a horrible job.
Yeah. Well, they claim towards the end of the documentary when things come out that they did look at George, but no, you didn't.
No.
You decided these cops from moment one, and they say that from moment one, your child is missing 31 days. She's not upset enough. She's lying to us. And if you're a liar, then therefore, you're pathological, and therefore you are a murderer. Right. They made these huge leaps from what, from their perception. Again, this is all about what you believe, your own biases and what you believe and how you process them in your brain.
They also said that she was not acting like a grieving or, like a concerned mother whose child was missing during those 31 days. They had pictures of her like at clubs and going out. And although she did say a lot of the pictures they had weren't even from that time period.
Which I didn't know, which again, nobody has ever said, like, there's one picture of her over a toilet. She's like, that's my 21st birthday. Like, that wasn't, so during the 31 days, she did go out and she was doing things,
but she was working because
she was also,
her parents didn't know this, but she said that she was trying to save up enough money to move out of their house. So she had been working at Universal Studios, but that job ended. And then she got a job working in clubs at night, doing promotions or something. And her boyfriend also worked in the clubs, but she didn't want to tell her parents this. She didn't want them to know that she was making all this money. And she said those pictures were taken. She says, I don't even have a drink in my hand in any of those pictures. She's like, I was there at the club working, promoting. And also, we'll talk more about this later. Her mental state was, she was not acting like a grieving person. She was literally shut down, like mentally trying to protect herself. Yeah. But we'll get more in that later because that's the next episode. Yeah, that's a lot.
But so instantly, because she didn't report it for 31 days, and the combination of that and the fact that she kept lying, the media and everyone, they took this narrative, which is she's a terrible mom, and of course she didn't want to have a child. She wanted to party with her friends, and so she killed her daughter so that she can party with her friends. That's
period.
And Caylee very much owns her lies and what she said. And she said, because she stole a friend's checkbook, she was, she got a tattoo, she did all of these things. And so she owns the fact that she stole that money, that she was, I think there's a video of her at Target, like buying food, and people are like, there's no food in there for a child. And like, she's got a big case of Bud Lights. And so everything she did during that time was scrutinized. But again, it was presented as all negative towards her. It wasn't presented of these 3 pictures here were from this time frame, and then she went and did this, then she went to do that. It was just these images that were splashed on TV over and over and over again.
Yeah, and they show, there's people in Florida who are standing outside her house with these signs that say you're a baby killer. And it was like an angry mob. Yeah. And people who didn't even know her were just hysterical over,
Well, what was also interesting, so then then it moves on to Caylee's story. And so she admits, I was lying to the police. She tells us the photos of her partying were over a 3-year period. And they interview a friend who says she was a good mom. She was really present and she was there. And my favorite 2 interviews are she had a boyfriend at the time, Tony Lazzaro. And so we meet 2 of Tony's former roommates, Clint, and who's the other guy? I wrote his name down in all my notes. Clint and Cameron. So Clint and Cameron are very much like they're the roommates, and they've spent time with Caylee and Caylee, and they were like, she was a good mom. She always, she had stuff for her. She would come over with a backpack. There were toys, there were snacks, there was this, there were that. She was a good mom, and they also showed the police interviews that they interviewed a bunch of her friends who all said she is a good mom. And I was like, I never saw any of that on the nightly news. Like that was never part of any of these stories.
They seized on anything, any inconsistent statement or lie or whatever, and that's all that they talked about.
Mm-hmm. So then they get into Caylee has a history of lying. And that she, that there's always, and she owns that, and that a lot of her lies, there was always some truth involved, but then it was a lie. And she says, I lied because I had to lie, because I've been lying for my entire life. My family, our whole family is a lie.
Yeah, and she started talking about how it started with her parents' relationship. So her father was, they said it was an ex-cop.
Working security.
Yeah, now working security, which leads me to believe that maybe he got fired from his police officer job, because why would you quit being a police officer? He's not that old.
Yeah.
Why would you quit that when you're still relatively young to go be a security guard? Because you got fired.
Yeah.
So he's probably got some shady something going on. And her mother was a nurse and worked all the time to support the family. The father was like financially not supporting the family.
Well, apparently he stole money from the mom's investment from
her retirement. Yeah.
And he cheated on her all the time. And we will learn that even while looking for Caylee, he was trolling women.
Yes.
That to me, that.
Yes. So yeah, her family was supposed to be this great all-American family, lived in a cute little house. And so she had to keep all these secrets and keep this facade going. And there was even a darker secret that she had to her entire life keep. And she reveals, and this came out in the trial, she reveals from the age of 8 to 12 that her father came into her bedroom, pretty much sounded like nightly almost, and raped her. And that when she turned 12, he stopped and started sending her brother in to molest her. I guess he never had, penetration with her.
Right, was, she said, from 12 to 15. And this is what I was wondering, because the stuff with the father stopped when she's 12, and then it started up with the brother. I don't know what the lag time was between the two. And what I was wondering is, did the father also molest the brother? And the brother was then acting out and then molesting Casey. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, I was like, I'm wondering if something was going on with the brother as well. And then, right, because a lot of people, they perpetuate the cycle. This is very, very common for someone who has been molested to molest. And so that's what I was just wondering, if the brother, because the way she described it with the brother, it seemed like he was almost like he would like reach under her shirt and touch her breast, like kind of that same thing like that Duggar kid, that Josh Duggar, who's now in prison, what he did to his sisters, which is, using them as an anatomy doll or something, right? Like, let me explore this. Oh, I have a sister. Let me go into her room. Like, so unreal.
Because what I thought when she said that her father stopped raping her at 12, I thought, well, maybe she got her period.
Oh.
And so he probably stopped. And then, I don't know what the connection is with the brother.
But she never told the mom, and the mom, this is a perfect storm. Mom's working all the time.
Yeah.
Mom was a nurse, so she's working these 14, 16-hour shifts. And she never told her mom, but she did tell her mom when she was 19. And we don't ever really hear what the mom did.
Well, she only told the mom about her brother, not about her father.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
And her mother called her. She said, well, that's why you're such a whore.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. How can I forget that? I just forgot to write it down. Oy.
Yeah. So her mom was no help.
Yes.
But she said she couldn't bring herself to talk about the father, even speak it, or, that came much later.
Yeah. But she gets pregnant, and then she lies to the family about the pregnancy. And apparently, because I was looking at some articles, Lee, her brother, and Lee adamantly denies that any of this ever happened, that he never molested her. And so does the father. So does George. But that I was just reading this article where Lee says, I didn't know anything about the pregnancy. Like, she started to show, and I was asking her about it, and they all lied to me. And that really, he was hurt, because he was like, why are you all lying to me? And just so weird. Like, why wouldn't you want to talk about this? Because she was young, because she wasn't married. Like, if she's having this baby, people aren't going to see the baby. Like, you can't keep lying about it. It was just so bizarre. But her father was a big liar, and she was like, I lied, it became my father. Like, I just started lying about anything I could lie about.
And that was the culture in their home. And, they tried to keep everything perfect. So we can't talk about this pregnancy until we have to.
Yes. And that was a big thing because her father told Casey to lie to the police.
Oh, that's right.
What she's claiming is my father told me to lie to them, which is why she, lied to them about where Caylee was, why she took him to Universal Studios, even though she didn't work there, like all of these things.
Yeah, he told her to tell the police exactly what she had told her mother. Mm-hmm. So that it would match.
Yeah.
But of course, everything she told her mother was a lie. So
what, and I was a little unclear about this because she did say this is what happened, which is her father took Caylee in the middle of the night. Then she remembers the father coming back with Kaylee's lifeless body and saying an accident happened, something happened to Caylee. She doesn't know. Then dad leaves again. And then the next morning she wakes up and he basically tells her, I've got Caylee, don't worry, she's okay. This part always that really confused me about what happened in this evening. You were asleep?
Well, it wasn't the evening.
What's your interpretation?
Okay, so we're going forward quite a bit. She did not reveal this,
Well,
I don't think, until she made this documentary.
Yes. That's part of that.
Right.
Yes.
So when she was going through the trial, she told her defense team about the molestation and the rape, and because they told her, look, they're trying to kill you.
Yeah.
You need to tell us everything and come clean. So in the trial, that was part of her defense. But she did not tell her defense team at the time what she said in the documentary, mostly because she hadn't gone through the process of unpacking it in her brain. She has spent the last 10 years doing therapy. Mm-hmm. She talks about how she puts all her memories in a box. Each memory is in a box, and she developed this kind of dissociative,
which is very common for trauma victims.
Disorder, right? Yeah. Like you compartmentalize these things, you put them away because your brain absolutely cannot handle them, especially as a young person. So it took her all this time of therapy and unpacking everything and being away from her family to put it all together and say what exactly happened. So in the trial, they didn't have the benefit of this story, so they went with this story of an accidental drowning because they had to have something. Yeah. They couldn't just go in there and say, well, she was molested, because you can't jump from, well, she was molested to, right. They had to have something to fill it in. So they used the maybe she drowned in the back pool story. But 10 years later, she says what really happened was she took a nap with Caylee in her bed. Mm-hmm. And
it's the middle of the day.
It's the middle of the day.
It's the middle of the night.
No, it's the middle of the day. Her mom is at work.
Of course.
Yeah. And she said that, well, backing up a little bit, because of what her father did to her, she was always very protective of Caylee. She never left Caylee alone with him. She didn't leave her out of her sight. She knew. I mean, and that's why she was trying to save up money to move out of there, because she didn't want to live that way. And she said that when Caylee was just after she was born, not too long after she was born, her mom discovered her dad was having an affair and kicked him out of the house. Yeah. And it was just her and her mom and Caylee. And she said it was the happiest time of her life because she was gone. She didn't have to see him or worry about him. And then when he came back, the mom took him back, and he came back, and she was like, I have to get out of here. Yeah. So anyway, she was always very protective, Caylee slept with her in the bed. She said that Caylee wouldn't even get out of the bed without her, would never get up and just go out in the house and wander around. She told her not to do that. She was trained not to do that. Yeah. So she lies down on the bed, and then I guess she, was I wonder if her father gave her something. Yeah. Because she said she'd always been
very foggy.
Yeah. She said she'd always been a light sleeper because she was molested every night. And she's used to hear, like, you're on you're on alert, like, is someone coming into my room? What's happening? But for some reason that day, she slept through this whole thing, and I think he gave her something.
Yeah.
And she said she woke up to her father shaking her and said, "Where's Caylee?" And she's like, "What do you mean? She's right here in the bed next to me." And then she looks and she's not there. She starts frantically, like, going around the house looking for her and looks all over. She goes outside. And then the interviewer says, "Well, did you check in the pool?" And she said, "I didn't have to, because I was walking by the side of the house and there was my dad standing there with her in his arms, and she was soaking wet, lifeless, limp body, soaking wet." And she said that he put Caylee in her arms and she just, like, collapsed, and she said she was cold, and she just didn't understand, like, what happened, had no idea. And then her father said, "Well, don't worry, she's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure everything's going to be okay." The father took the baby from her, and she never saw her again.
Yeah.
And so she said during that whole 30 days, the father was constantly telling her, "Don't worry, she's okay. She's going to come back. You guys will be reunited soon." And even though that might sound ridiculous,
Yeah.
she believed it, because she had to have something. Of course, you don't want to accept your child's dead.
Yes. Yes.
She had to hold on to something.
And so that makes, you can, when you hear that, you can really understand why she kept lying to the police. Because I think she kept thinking, "Oh, I'll just tell them that the baby's with the nanny, and then, but Caylee will show up anytime. Dad told me. Dad told me this. Dad told me that she'll come back." So.
And they have footage of him visiting her in jail and telling her still on the phone in jail, "Everything will be fine. She'll be back soon. Everything will be fine." So that corroborates that. So it's not just her saying something crazy.
Well, what's really interesting is up until this point, so she's in jail for the lying, and she starts writing. She meets this woman, Robin McConnell, and she starts. The sense that I get from what they were telling us in the documentary was that Casey never really talked about the abuse or ever really even admitted it until she started writing these letters to Robin McConnell about the abuse. That's where she really started to unpack things and talk about things. Because I can't remember if this other woman had abuse in her history or not. I don't know. I really don't think that feels shady to you.
Well, no, I just didn't understand that whole part with this woman, Robin, because they were in solitary confinement together, like, I don't know, in cells next to each other, but they couldn't see each other or talk to each other. And she writes to her and she says, "I feel a connection with you." And she starts divulging all of these things to her. And it's like, why? That made no sense to me. I just kind of ignored that whole.
But she said when she was in jail, she felt alone. She felt scared. She felt isolated. She felt all of these things. And I think that because she was also away from the family for the first time in probably her whole life,
right,
and they weren't in her ear all the time, my guess is I think they saw each other in passing or somehow started to communicate, and that's how she started to really unpack or talk about the abuse.
Yeah.
And it was a little odd because they brought Robin in and then we never saw her again.
Yeah. Also instrumental in that was the woman who I couldn't ever find her name, but she was the mitigation specialist. The bald woman with the big earrings.
Yes. Oh, her. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing in death penalty cases.
Yes. I didn't write her name down.
Yeah.
Yes.
In death penalty cases, they always have someone like a mitigation specialist, they call them, who, because you have to prepare for the prospect that there's going to be a guilty verdict, and then you move into the penalty phase of whether the death penalty is imposed. You start very early on gathering information about the person's entire life, everything. You want to go as deep as you can. They go back and they get every record from your childhood, your school records, your medical records, police records, anything, to try to find something, to show that, you had trauma, you had abuse, and of course, It's usually all of that stuff.
So that's right. And then Casey starts telling that woman, I keep forgetting her name.
I never could find her. They never put her name up.
But she and the woman that Casey, the mitigation attorney, also had and says, I also was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And she absolutely aligned with everything Casey was saying and doing. Like it was, for her, it was very much like, oh yeah, this is how children react when they've been abused. So then what's really interesting was that, so, you know, she disappeared in June. Caylee disappeared in June, died. Then it was reported in July. And so they found Caylee's body in December of 2008. And what's really interesting about this is that they talked about, this was the first trial that we had where we had social media, right, on this level. That's the one thing that is very different than the OJ trial, different than any of these other trials, was this was the dawn of Facebook. And now for the first time, you know, obviously the internet had been around and people could have blog and anything, but social media really made it so that anyone could have an opinion. And I think this is also contributes. I think that the media itself and how they handle the case, they are one of the reasons why there's so much information. But the other part of it was that there were people on social media constantly, again, with half information, or they're getting all their information from Nancy Grace and spewing it and then telling their neighbor and doing this and doing that.
But it didn't even feel like information to me. It just felt like vitriol.
Yeah.
And it was as if all anybody needed to know about this case was that this was a young mother and she killed her daughter.
Yeah.
And there's no...
And she didn't act.
She didn't act properly. And there's no other person that could have done it.
Well, the other part of it too is that, you know, just this whole idea, again, it's like with women, right? Women should want to be mothers. And if you are a mother, you should not want anything else. And it was the fact that this woman killed her daughter because she wanted to party, right? Like this idea of what the expectations are of women.
Yeah, it was horribly sexist.
Yeah, very sexist. But and a lot of the power of the media and all this, a lot of this reminds me of Amanda Knox. I don't know if you ever watched her documentary, but one of the issues with Amanda Knox was obviously Foxy Knoxy and the media and these people that swooped in and painted her this way. But she was also someone else who didn't react the way in which people felt like she should react when you have someone die in your orbit.
Yeah.
So the parents then go on a media tour.
Yeah, the parents were on every single show. They started some foundation to help find other missing children, which I'm sure all the money went to them. They bought a boat.
And like put stuff on the side. Their plan was, we're going to buy a boat and then we're going to put information about missing children on it. And we're just going to go out on the boat all day and just, you know, so that people see the boat. I mean, it was crazy.
Right.
So here was my other legal question that I had, because as we're bebopping along, they start talking about the grand jury, right? And the father was everyone that testified in the grand jury was a cop, except for him, except for George. And so what I don't understand is, why are those records sealed? Why is it that the grand jury is there, I know, to decide whether or not to indict, right?
Right.
That's what these do.
Right.
So why is all of that testimony sealed? Why can't we know what the father said in that? Or anyone said?
Well, I don't know in Florida, like what the law is, but I don't know if it was sealed, because people in this documentary were making comments about what he said to the grand jury. Like they knew.
I could have sworn they said something like someone else said, but we couldn't get those records.
Oh.
So I just wrote, why is grand jury testimony a secret? I don't know.
I don't know.
So here in California, if you testify in front of a grand jury, is that sealed? Is that protected? Is no one ever able to see your testimony?
I honestly don't know.
Oh, okay.
Have to look that up.
Yeah. So
because grand juries, most cases are charged. They're just charged by the DA.
Yeah.
If the use of a grand jury is, if for some reason the DA doesn't want to just straight ahead charge someone for different reasons, or a lot of times it's political. So like in a high profile case, they don't want to be accused of just, willy-nilly charging someone. So you put it in front of the grand jury, and then you can just say, oh, well, the grand jury indicted them.
Got it. Yeah.
And take the heat off of you.
But what they presented seemed very skewed.
Yeah, I mean, it often is. And there's like this old joke where, a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really doesn't. It's more perfunctory. Like I said, it's political. Like, you don't, as the DA, you want to take the heat off of you and say, well, I didn't charge it this way. The grand jury did. But yeah, you're presenting to the grand jury what your case is. And
yeah.
I mean, the reason for sealing it would be, I guess, to not prejudice, the subsequent trial. You don't want that information out there and tainting anything.
So and then we meet Kristen Patton, citizen journalist.
Yes.
And what was interesting is she comes on, though, she says, after the case, I started looking at everything and I started researching everything. And she starts to talk about how George contradicted himself all over the place. That when he was testifying in court, Casey, he very much had this thing of Casey is a liar. You can't believe her. Kate, we didn't know where Caylee was. What were some of the other things he was saying? We're these concerned grandparents, and there's a weird odor in her car, right? That was a whole other thing where he smelled something, off in her car, like maybe a dead body. And the more that he did that, the more he came across as being really honest, that he was just this concerned grandfather. And that Casey's this big fat liar. But when Kristen went back and looked at all the notes and looked at everything in all the places in the media that he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, right? Like in the media, he was a concerned father and concerned grandfather, but behind closed doors with the cops, he was, it's Casey.
He was helping them. And she says, why didn't this blogger, Kristen, she says, why didn't the media notice? And it was
it
was because the media was so fixated. They had already villainized Casey. They had already had these George and Cindy on all these shows already. So they were in their pocket. They wanted them to keep coming back. So they're not going to call them out. And everyone was blind to that because they'd already made up their minds that this was Casey. And he testified that I think they said
the key witness.
He was
prosecution.
He was the key witness. He was their first witness, and he testified a total of 5 times. Coming back on the stand for rebuttal and different stuff. And and the other inconsistency was he kept saying that it was an accident gone wrong. An accident out of control. But yet he's testifying for the prosecution who wants to kill her. Yeah. So if all your child did was, there was an accident, and he said something about how he didn't think that Casey could hurt anybody, or something to that effect. Said he told Larry King that he didn't think that she could hurt anyone. He called it an accident, but participated in trying to kill her. Like, why would he want Casey to die because of an accident?
Yeah. Well, the other thing was that even though he was the key witness, because he was the grandfather of the victim, he and Cindy were allowed in the courtroom. Right. So part of the inconsistency was that George was there the whole time, and then he sees something that contradicts him, so he can just go right up there and like,
fill in the blanks.
People.
No, that was
utterly.
That was awful. They should have excluded him. That's what you always do. Witnesses are always excluded.
Yes.
I mean, that's
one of the reasons why.
Right.
So if he's gonna, I'm sorry, but if you're gonna testify in this case, then he doesn't get to be there. I'm sorry, this was your granddaughter. If people get up in arms about that. But then we're now in the third part of this documentary, and we see, hands down, one of the greatest moments ever was Clint and Cameron
they flipped,
doing a full 180 before our eyes. That was the most bizarre thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And I was a little bit like, why do we keep going back to these two young who are this guy's roommate?
I kept saying the same thing. I'm like, Clint again? Like, what? Clint was going on Dr. Oz, and we see that. I was like, why is he even in this documentary? And then it hit me in the end. He was symbolic of all the uninformed people.
Yes, he was.
Because the director, or whoever was questioning him, she started saying, well, did you know this? And did you know about this? And she started explaining the effect of abuse and all this kind of stuff. And then he's like, and she explained that concept of how George is trying to kill her for an accident, and then you see him just shift. He's like, oh my God, no, that's terrible.
Yes. Well, the best was that he said something before he realized his mistakes. He said, well, she kept saying that it was Zanny the nanny. And I think he says this. I think Zanny is Xanax, and that Casey gave Caylee Xanax and would do that so that she could party. And then they ask him, like, well, do you have any evidence of that? Do you have any evidence whatsoever of this? No.
Yeah.
No. So Zanny is actually a real person that Casey had met, is someone's babysitter, not hers. And it's got nothing to do with Xanax. And, but that was...
Where did he get that idea?
The thing is that he was on social media, on Facebook, and my friend from high school said, Zanny the nanny, Xanax. And that's what that means. It's like, oh, okay.
And Cameron also said...
So seemed to be the more together of the two. But he also was...
He said something very profound. So, the director said the same kind of things to him, that she said to Clint about, did you realize this? Did you know this? And he was like, no. And then the director asked him, well, why do you think that George would do that? His inconsistent lies. And he said something so raw and unfiltered and on point. He said, well, to cover his tracks, that's the only logical explanation. And I was like, yes, Cameron, you just summed up this entire case in that one moment. Get yourself into law school.
But this also goes back to, the problem that we have in, besides social media is that it really irritates me that we do not hold journalists to a better standard, to a higher standard.
Right. Oh, yeah. Because they're not journalists. Nancy Grace is not a journalist.
Yeah. And this is what irritates me. I like Dr. Drew, but
I don't. I hate him.
I feel like, but seeing Dr. Drew go in there and say, she's a sociopath. Dr. Drew, come on. You're a doctor. You haven't evaluated her. You don't know. Like, all of these people have never met her, don't know anything. And you know how it rolls. I've been on TV and talked about things too. They say you have, like, essentially they say, can you do this tomorrow? And they ask you a bunch of questions, and then you're on TV, and they want your expert opinion, but they have the right to cut it however they want, to do it however they want. But with no sense you have, when you're one of these quote unquote experts, you're just giving your opinion based on the facts that they're laying out.
Yeah, and you've never examined the person. Oh, this was the best. When they had an actual expert on, the guy, Dr. Kropp, the guy with the beard and mustache and glasses, who was one of the experts who testified at trial, and he gave Casey the MMPI, and he said that there were no signs of psychosis, no signs of any mental disorder. And then there was another doctor, Dr. Gold, who said the same thing. No signs of whatever. So I don't know why, but this Dr. Kropp went on Dr. Drew's show. And Dr. Drew said, well, do you think that Casey Anthony is a psychopath? And Dr. Kropp said no. And Dr. Drew lost his shit. And he's like, what? What do you mean? How can you say that?
This is the thing, right? This Dr. Kropp, I remember this now, right? So this is the problem with it is because this is because journalism has now become entertainment, and news and nightly news has become this entertainment. The thing is, that guy, the doctor, he's kind of like just your typical doctor.
Yeah,
he's kind of this magnetic.
No, he's like a nerd.
He's just going there going, no, that didn't happen. No, that didn't happen. And so what happens is that Dr. Drew's opinion and his persona gets to be bigger than him. Right? Like, Dr. Drew, you had this guy on your show. Why then, if he says no to you, like, have a conversation.
Well, and also, didn't you know he was going to say no? Did no one do a pre-interview with
that's the
him?
other thing. Because trust me, I was on the doctors, and that they talked to me for so friggin' long about everything I was going to talk about, and it grilled me with stuff, and so that's why that part doesn't make any sense because the producers know what your position is before you show up. What I was trying to say earlier is the part that is really up in the air is they are, because they're producing these shows, they're just looking for, oh, you're an expert in this, you're an expert in that. Okay, you come on, you're a doctor, you know what I mean? And then these people are quote unquote experts now, right? Of this particular case. And it's like, no, they're an expert in their field. They're just not an expert in this case.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Well, I'm so glad that Dr. Drew and Dr. Oz and they're no longer on the air. Is Nancy Grace still on the air?
Oh God, I think she is.
God. Oh, and then there's that other woman who has the strange hair, the rooster hair.
Yeah, she was
She's awful too. I mean, they're just awful. They shouldn't.
And so
shouldn't be allowed on TV.
And then there's one. So next, Lee, the brother, testifies, I guess, on the defense's side for Caylee,
right,
saying that he came forward and said that when they had dogs that passed away in their family, that they would be wrapped up in a blanket, put in a garbage bag, and then the garbage bag would be wrapped up with duct tape. This is how the dad disposed of all the other animals they ever had, which is exactly how they found Caylee.
Yeah. And also, he didn't really make any attempt to bury her.
Yeah.
And because I think he wanted the body to be found.
Of course.
Because he knew they were going to blame Casey. And he knew that because he thinks he's so smart, Mr. Ex-Cop, he knew he had a plan of how he was going to frame her.
Yeah.
And, this is one of the saddest things is, when Casey is describing, when she finally has all her memories and recollections and everything sorted out, and she tells the story about that day and seeing her dad, I gasped when she said, she said, I turned the corner and there he is, holding her body. And she says, why didn't he call 911? I wasn't the only one at home, but I'm blamed for this and accused of it. And I didn't do it.
Got his records. They never got his phone records.
They got his phone records, but not the cell tower records. Because here was another thing they were trying to pin on Casey.
Yeah, there was a lot of junk science.
That day when Caylee was killed, by George, that's my belief.
Yeah. Well, at the end, I want to talk about what do we both think that's happening? Because I have a theory.
All right. I do too. So on that day, he was supposed to be at work, I guess, at 3:00.
Yes.
So they have, so at 2:49, someone logs into their computer at home and does a search for foolproof suffocation.
Yes.
And they tried to pin that on Casey, saying that, because I guess it was her password. And she's like, it was a family computer. We all had the same password. We shared a password. She said, I did not do that. And they said, well, there wouldn't have been enough time for George to have searched for that and then been at work at 3:00. Well, who says he's at work at 3:00? There's no proof he made it to work.
the police.
Yeah. And then to cover his tracks, he then calls from his cell phone, like at 3:10 or something.
Mm-hmm.
He purposefully calls the house from his cell phone to make it look like.
Yeah.
But he could have been just around the corner dumping her body, because her body was literally dumped around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they never got the cell tower records, so we don't know where he was. But they have her records, cell tower records, and she was at home that whole time. She left at like 4:00, went over to her boyfriend's house, and didn't come back for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was the time that.
Okay, and so next is one of my other favorite parts of the show. So then we go on to, they had a woman named Crystal testify who had an affair with George. Guess where Crystal and George met? At one of the tents.
At a vigil
tent. So George, the grieving father and grandfather, meets Crystal, and they start talking about missing children and Caylee, and then they start
an affair.
You know, even if you think George is completely innocent, the guy is just the worst. I mean, come on. And so she testified that George said to her, I have written down accident waiting to happen.
I put down it was an accident that snowballed out of control.
Oh, I don't know where I got accident waiting to happen, but basically she testified that George admitted this.
Right.
It said this.
It was an accident. Hello.
Yeah. So now we're, and then we're coming back to, they interview these cops from the beginning again, talking about it. And one of the cops said, which I thought was so interesting, was this cop admits all the family members lied to him. Every single one. George, Cindy, Lee,
right.
Casey, they all lied to him. And then he says, being a liar doesn't make you a murderer.
Yeah, that was precious.
So hold on. But that contradicts exactly what you said at the beginning of this process. But at the beginning of this thing, the series, you say at the beginning, if you are a liar, you're pathological, and if you're pathological, you're a murderer, right? So
that's how they were treating Casey. She's a liar, therefore she's a killer.
Casey's a liar, so therefore she's a killer. George is a liar, but that doesn't mean that you're a murderer. And there was definitely the fact that George was an ex-cop, and we saw the tapes from George being interviewed, that he's kind of leading them, and he's constantly like pushing them and moving them in certain directions, and that he came in and just like, oh, I'm a cop and we're in this together and we're buddies and
I want to help you.
I want to help you and all of that. And then we flash towards 2019, and I didn't realize that George got into a horrible accident.
Yeah.
And he's in one of those huge braces. It's like, Jesus Christ, buddy, you look horrendous. Like this, you're going to go on Dr. Oz?
Yeah.
At 20, so weird.
Well,
and you just got this. I think they probably.
Well, he tells Dr. Oz, he says, I need to be forgiven by her, meaning Casey, and my son. And then Cindy immediately says, but it was an accident. And then, Casey's watching this with the director, and she's like, what? Wait, what? She'd never seen this before. And she was like, well, what does he need to be forgiven for? She just wants to, it's like we keep getting, with George, we keep getting so close.
Yes.
We so close to him, admitting something. Maybe on his deathbed. I guess he's still alive, I think.
Yeah, that accident looked nasty. Oof,
And then the funeral.
Oh my God, I had never seen scenes from this funeral. I was like, what is this? I said, are we starting to watch a religious program?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? That funeral and the guy singing.
And they wouldn't even let Casey come to the funeral,
which is really awful.
She's sitting in jail.
Stars of the show. And so, did you write down what the father said? What George says.
Yeah.
It's the greatest quote ever, which is, to get a hug from a small child that gives me energy like you couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
So he describes, and this is what really bothered Casey, and it should bother anybody, which is the sweet smell of her sweat when she came back into the house.
And the smell of her hair.
If
that's not pedophile language, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Who says that? I've never heard an adult say that.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, it's gross.
Especially a grandfather to your granddaughter. I mean, I might hug my son and he kind of always smells a little gross. And I always feel like, you smell so sweet, like a little puppy dog or whatever it is. But, I think that's right. You have those feelings, but that's weird. Like, this is a funeral for your grandchild. Like, this is public. You must have written these thoughts down, right, George? I mean, that's why it's so odd. Like, these are your feelings and memories about your daughter.
Well, another creepy thing he said, and I can't remember where he said it, but it was like he was giving us some sort of interview on camera. His description of the day that maybe he was on the stand. I think he was on the stand, and the description of the day that, when he last saw Caylee in the house was like too perfect.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
yes.
He described her outfit and talking about her cute little pink top and her jean shorts and her pink socks and her hair pulled back. And it's like, what, huh?
Again, men never notice.
They don't notice any of that stuff because then
with two boys, they don't notice a damn thing.
Because then the defense attorney says, well, what was Cindy wearing that day?
And he hasn't looked at Cindy in years.
No, he's got other girlfriends, but of course he couldn't remember what she.
And he's incredulous about it. He's like, well, how would I know?
Right. If you didn't know that. If you didn't know that was the day that Caylee was going to die, then. Why would you even remember what she was wearing?
So then this is sort of the end of the third part is really where, and I get this, you get the sense from Casey too, that she knew this was all coming to this head where she was going to have to talk about this of, does she think that her father molested Caylee? And it sounds like, I think that, I really feel for her because she's just, she doesn't want to believe it, but everything goes there.
Right.
And that the death and what happened, was connected with the father molesting and Caylee. And it's incredibly, painful and difficult to watch and, really just having to watch her relive all of this and all of this come to her and to talk about it more and more.
Yeah. And one other thing, before we talk about that, I just want to note that in the trial, they had an expert. The defense had an expert, Sally Carrioff, who is a grief specialist for young people. And she said that young adults are reluctant grievers and they shut down and pretend that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And, all this constant questioning. Well, why didn't she do? Let me tell you something. I mean, even as an adult, and I can remember times when I was younger, when something really shakes you, something really weird happens, I can't tell you how many times I've just swept something under the rug.
Yeah.
Just like, no, I don't want to think about that. Mm-hmm. That's a normal human response. Yeah. And the worse the incident, the more you're just going to shut down because the brain can only handle so much. The brain's job is to keep you safe and to keep certainty and stability. And that is just way too much for the brain to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that our brains, right, we're cave people in many ways. So we operate on this place of fight, flight, freeze. And so she very much, it sounds like she was in this state of trauma, anxiety every single day of her life. Yeah. And we hear this all the time with trauma survivors that they disassociate, that they, push it aside, that they, they have to find a way. You have to find a way to get through your days when you're dealing with all of this trauma. And this is one of the things that, I wish lawmakers and people in power would focus on this more, because I really do think that we need to have, your brain doesn't fully form until you're 25. And so we see all of these cases of kids with false confessions. We see, Casey Anthony's a good one. Amanda Knox is another, of these young people, and we need to treat them differently. We cannot,
Right.
I am so sick of people like, oh, they're 17, so we're going to try them as an adult, or they're 16. It seems like if you're 15 and above, we're going to try you as an adult. My son just turned 15. He's far beyond he is not an adult. And even though you're 18 and 21 and able to drink and able to,
You're still not
still not completely developed. This is why they won't let you rent a car until you're 25.
Yeah,
That's why you can't rent
that
a
should
car.
be the standard.
The standard should be 25. It really should be. And so we need different laws for kids from 25 on down. And they're starting to see this more and more in the drug and alcohol world. They're starting to create more programs for young adults. They're starting to create more of these things, but we need to have a different system or a different way of looking at these particular issues, because someone who is 22, even though they're quote unquote an adult, is not going to react the same way that someone 32 is.
Yeah.
And that's just the end of that. So anyway, then he decided, I do want to hear your theory about what you think happened. To Caylee, but I also went and did a little semi-investigative journalism.
All right.
Because it's not that investigative, but I wanted to just sort of see, what are people saying about this? And what's been really interesting
About this documentary?
About the documentary, about Casey Anthony. Is this going to change people's perceptions of her? How do people feel? And so I went to, I saw one article in People magazine, they interview this former juror. And so the former juror is like, wait a second, they told us she was drowned. That's not right. She lied. They lied to us about that. The juror was upset that what really happened wasn't exactly what the defense said it was going to be. And you're a little bit like, did you not just watch the documentary?
Yeah.
Do you not understand everything that's happening here, juror? It was so weird. And then another person this was In Touch, another great magazine.
Your sources are impeccable.
But I just thought these were so weird. Another person said that they said, someone sees Casey today, and Casey likes to go out and still likes to go out and party, and she likes to play poker with beer. I'm like, so do I. What?
Yeah.
So because she's
30-something years old.
She's a single person, and so what? Casey Anthony is never supposed to...
Right. Never have fun a day in her life ever again.
She's not allowed to have fun. And after watching this, Casey's life is not fun.
No,
Casey's
it's
life
horrible.
Is hard. It's horrible. And I have to say, that whole stuff between her and the defense team.
Oh,
these people.
She lucked out.
She really lucked out.
We have to, yeah. We have to talk about the defense team again at the end, because
we can talk about that. But that was my hard-hitting journalism.
Well,
that's I just got frustrated reading those things. I said, but you're not really paying attention. Do you know what I mean? We're back to this black and white thinking.
Yeah.
We want everything to be black and white. We want Casey bad. Mother should be like this. And, blah, blah, however we're seeing it. And what people don't understand is we are complex. We are complex creatures who don't all react and do things the exact same way.
Well, and that's what I love about there's so many documentaries out now.
For the podcast.
Yeah. Well, re-examining these old cases, and I'm like, well, thank God, because, we need to, people need to learn, to understand nuance.
Yeah. That's why when I'm looking
at
I
know.
I'm like, these people aren't understanding.
And because I feel like watching this documentary, to me, it was sort of like seeing the case for the first time. Because I said, I didn't pay any attention to it. And I knew that, the odds were against her. So if a jury actually saw reasonable doubt and didn't convict her, I thought, well, it must have been a lot of reasonable doubt, because juries don't typically go that way in these kinds of cases. So I thought, well, that's good. And I can't remember who was talking about the juror statements, but the juror statements after the trial, they said that the jurors really questioned George's involvement. They were suspicious of him and his selective memory. They said he could be lying, and that his story of that day was too perfect. And so they caught on.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So it doesn't matter if she drowned or she died some other way. The point is that there was not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for Caylee.
Yeah.
So what does it matter how she actually died?
Yeah.
She died.
Again, this juror is a real idiot. I mean, I don't even know if this juror, again, it's People magazine. I don't know what to tell you.
Is it even a real juror?
No, it's not, none of this is real journalism. I was just kind of surprised by people's reactions. So because we're over an hour now, so let's wrap up by talking about what your theory is on how Caylee died, and then we can let's end on a high note and talk about
how great those people.
The defense team, and I've forgotten the guy. I should have written it down. You're much better at writing down people.
Oh, I wrote.
The investigator took Caylee.
Pat McKenna, the real hero. Yes, God bless him.
Thing. Okay, so what's your theory?
Okay, my theory is that George did come into the room. I think he did drug Caylee, put something in her coffee or something. I think he wanted to abuse Caylee. I don't know if he'd ever done it before because, Caylee testified about how she didn't really let her out of her sight. Yeah. So he wouldn't have had the opportunity. So this might have been the first time that he did it. Took her out of the room, tried to abuse her. Now, one of the things that Caylee said that he used to do to her when he was raping her at night, when she was a child, was that if she tried to protest at all or tried to, fight back or say no, he would take a pillow and put it over her head until she passed out. Mm-hmm. And sometimes she'd wake up the next morning or a few hours later knowing she could tell what had happened. So that's part of his MO. Mm-hmm. I think he, obviously the child is going to be making noise. I think he put a pillow over her head and killed her. Mm-hmm. And then I think he put her in the pool and showed the body to Caylee all wet like she had been in the pool. So in case Caylee did decide to call 911, because he couldn't stop her. Mm-hmm. There was a chance his control tactics and his fear that, she'd been living with wouldn't work. In case she called 911, they could just say, well, it's an accidental drowning. And as the defense pointed out, and that's the leading cause of death for kids in Florida.
Yes.
Okay, people. I mean, Jesus. So they could just say it was accidental drowning. The police would probably believe them, and they would never do any kind of autopsy or find out how she really died.
Yeah.
And that's what I think happened.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was going back and forth between did he smother Caylee or did he give her the same drug that he gave? Because that's why I thought it was the middle of the night, because I was so confused about why she seemed so out of it. Mm-hmm. And so there was another part of me that kind of wondered, and it came back to this whole Clint thing and Xanax and Zanny the nanny and all of that I was, because obviously a lot of what Clint thought for a long time was George feeding stuff to him. So I thought maybe the dad drugged Caylee too, and just because she's so little, gave her
too much,
and that's how she died. So it was one of those two things. What I understand is, so if you're George and this happens and she's the wet, why not call 911 right there? Like, why not, why not just call 911? Did that feel too difficult for him to be able to do? Like, he wants control. He wants to control the narrative. He wants to control the situation. This horrible things happen. You're telling your daughter she's drowned. And then why not just call 911? Is it that he wanted to? I just don't understand that.
I think he wanted to be able to pin it on Caylee definitively. And that, this missing child and the finding the dead body and all of that would point so much more to Caylee and the fact that she didn't report it.
Yeah, okay.
Because he was going to prevent her from reporting it.
That's it.
Okay. He was going to
prevent her from reporting it. Okay.
String her along, make her look guilty, get the pictures of her in the club.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get the sense that George is that
smart
and diabolical and all of these other things. But I mean, tell you, like, white privilege, cock.
Well,
privilege.
Yeah, he pulled it off because he was buddy. Once those police got involved, those Keystone cops, those stupid detectives, once they got involved, he had them wrapped around his finger.
Yes. All right. So let's wrap up with the defense. This amazing, she really,
Yes.
I mean, she was dealt a very bad hand, but she lucked out with this defense team. Like she got an amazing defense team of people who recognize that, the first focus was so much on, we've got to get her off. We've got to, get this not guilty verdict. And then after she's acquitted, they start getting death threats, and the whole team is like, "Oh my God, what do we do?"
Yeah, we can't just release her out into the world
because she's on probation for 1 year for lying to the cops, so she could not leave the state of Florida, and that's also a felony. So she couldn't go to Europe, she couldn't get a passport and go anywhere.
Right.
She had to stay in the state of Florida, the state where people want her dead.
Yes.
So,
yeah. So, Jose Baez, I was shocked he wasn't part of this documentary. He seems to have kept a low profile after this case. Probably smart. He doesn't want to be known for this case necessarily because of all the negative connotations. He's gone on to be very successful.
Yes.
He's a very good lawyer, very smooth, did an excellent job. They all did. This woman,
really good.
Yeah,
people.
Their forensic expert, Dorothy Clay Sims, she was great. She explained how the prosecution was using a bunch of unreliable junk science. This thing about the chloroform was a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
There was no chloroform on the bodies or the remains.
I thought what's really interesting was she was talking about the dogs, and the dogs will get a scent.
Yeah.
But if the dogs don't get a scent, that's not looked at either. So if the dog gets a scent of something, and I just want to say, like, I have 2 dogs and they bark at everything all the time. And
Well, these are trained dogs.
mine aren't trained. But what I'm saying is it is I thought that was very interesting because it's true. Like the dog can get a scent of something or anything, and then immediately, oh, that's guilty. Then there was a body here.
Right.
This is what's happening. Versus dogs go in and don't get a scent at all.
Well, and there was a second dog who didn't pick up anything.
So it's a little bit of, oh, well, we're going to believe the dog that got the
Right, of course. Why not? Yeah, and there was no DNA on the duct tape. They made a big deal about how the killer duct taped the girl's head.
Well, yeah, and everyone thought that she had duct tape across her mouth. Clint and Caylee.
Yeah.
Were like, oh,
There was no
by that.
DNA from anybody on the duct tape, which means the duct tape was on the exterior of the bag, and in the process of, everything decomposing and whatever, in probably animals and things disturbing it unraveled. So anyway, she was excellent, and she
who was the woman with the glasses?
so that was Lisa Beth Fryer. So she was a lawyer. I think she did she work for Cheney Mason? I don't know. She was one of the lawyers.
She was great. And
She was great.
And she also seems like very much has taken Casey in like a daughter, like a sister, like a friend. She's there. And that's the other part of this too, right, with Casey is I'm always watching for who's on this person's side, and what are they like? And I felt like all of these lawyers that were on her defense team, like these weren't slick people that are just trying to tell you something that you want to hear.
They believed in her.
They believed in her, and they were straightforward.
Yeah.
Like people that you're like, okay, good. I can listen to you. I can rely on you.
Yeah. And Cheney Mason said he had done over 350 jury trials in his career. And he says, Casey Anthony is the only client I've ever had, her numbers programmed in my phone, who I've ever maintained contact with. And then Pat McKenna, the real hero, he was the investigator. He took Casey into his home.
She had nowhere to go.
She had nowhere to go. So she had to keep a low profile. They didn't want anyone to know that she was living there. And she started working for him and organizing his office because he was kind of old school. I don't think he really didn't have many computer skills.
She's really and got him on the internet and a few other things for him.
Organized his whole office.
Helped him with technology.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and she said he is the person who, if I ever got married, I'd want him to walk me down the aisle. I mean, it's her father figure at this point. And yeah, these people are just lovely people. And that's her, that's her family.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Whew. What a whole, this was a lot, this 3-parter, but.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. And, you know, sorry if we didn't get everything exactly right. I watched it twice and I took notes. Yeah. And I still, you know, it's hard to distill it down to an hour podcast.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information and it's, you know, it's not linear, you know, you have to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, when I watch these things, I try very hard to like always come in with it with an open mind. You know, I had thoughts and feelings about Casey Anthony. I really didn't know. I did not have a direct thought one way or the other if I thought she was guilty or not. But when I first saw her and she's putting up the pictures of Caylee, you know, she's very guarded. She's chewing gum. You know, I was kind of like, who is this person? You know, I'm trying to get a sense of her. But by the end, you very much, she really opens herself up and really shows you, like, this is who I am. And I do appreciate people that are willing to say, all of these things over here that I did, I lied, I stole, I did this. Like, these things are true. But, you know, but this is my truth.
And that makes it much more believable. If someone can admit that, you know, their flaws, that they lied, whatever, that makes it much more authentic and believable, as opposed to someone like George, who, everything is like this way, and, you know,
I'm such a wonderful
grandfather. All I care about is, you know,
my granddaughter and finding her, except when a pretty woman comes around.
Right, and I need to stop and have an affair.
And then I'll get back to looking for Caylee.
Right.
Real.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Well, this was a long one. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. And also give us and leave us a 5-star review. And you're always welcome to email us at psychlegalpoppodcast@gmail.com. Give us your suggestions on some documentaries or anything that we want to cover. We would love to hear it.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.